You want to start or what?
Well, The Last of Us Season 2 is out, and right off the bat I can say it's not really good. But even though it might seem that way, this won't be a simple hate review, so if you expected that, I'm sorry, I guess? Just to illustrate where I come from, I like Part 2. It's one of my favorite games. Heck, I even have a Last of Us 2, and I didn't get that when the first one came out. I played it a year after it was released, I think, in the middle of the ravaging pandemic, so I was in a very vulnerable spot already. Then the game came along and completely shattered me. So I'm biased in a way that I liked the story as well as the way it's being told, even though you could argue about that, and many of you certainly will. I'm just gonna give my honest opinion about the stuff I did or didn't like about the show, what changes were made compared to Part 2, and whether they made sense to me or not. So, about those changes. Some of them are good, some of them not, and pretty much all of them are half-baked and undercooked. I am generally not a person who is taken back by change. In many cases, it makes sense when adapting one form of media into another. I will also try to use as much footage of the show as I can, but I also don't want to get a copyright strike, so if I use footage from the game, you know why. So, let's start with the positives. Generally, I like the way they built up the cordyceps reaching into Jackson. It could have made for an interesting side plot, but we'll get to that later. I also like the idea that they regularly have to fend off smaller or bigger groups of infected. I like that the Seraphites were the first thing we saw from Seattle, apart from Abby's group, which for me didn't really need further introduction, as we're gonna have a bunch of Abby shenanigans in Season 3 by the looks of it. This is also something I want to talk about. Splitting the events of the game into 2 seasons is a good decision, as there is so much happening, but to do it the same way the game did is an interesting choice. I predict that the next season is going to have way less watch time, just a gut feeling. The Joe scene is as heart-wrenching as ever. Props to Bella Ramsey for portraying Ellie's anger and desperation the way they did. Sadly though, this will be pretty much the only instance in which I'm going to positively point out Bella's performance. They also changed the way the infection is transmitted, but that was already established in Season 1. In the show you could only get infected by getting bitten until now, and the scene where spore transmission is introduced is just haunting and overall well done, as well as the introduction of the stalkers. The pillars overgrown with fungus, the people being buried in it, and exhaling spores is just very foreboding of what is to come. Another good change was that they put all the Joel flashbacks into one episode to have a break from the main story just before the season finale. That episode was actually the one I really enjoyed, as it explored the thing that I like to see the most in shows like these. It showed the relationship between Joel and Ellie and how it changed over the years, how they deepened their father-daughter relationship and what conflicts it had to endure, ultimately leading to the estrangement due to Joel's lies. That's the shit I want to see. I'm watching the show for the characters, not for the action. It's also the one episode where the actors can show their range. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey have such great chemistry. But now, let's talk about the negatives, and oh boy, there is a lot of negatives. Starting with the most obvious, the protagonist. I cannot stand Show Ellie. It seems like there has been no development in the 5 years between Season 1 and 2. In Season 1, Ellie was 14 and free from her federal military school for the first time. It makes sense that she shows typical teenager behavior, being rebellious and testing boundaries. Now, however, she's 19, almost in her 20s, and it still seems like she doesn't take anything that's happening seriously. The whole relationship to Dina seems like some road trip romance. At times it was on the verge of being cheesy, and that's the last thing I want in a show like this. Ellie in the game is not only more relatable, for me personally, as she is a little bit of an introvert feeling uncomfortable in big crowds, but doesn't take shit from anyone and is deeply disappointed by and angry at Joel for his actions in the hospital. They weren't able to settle the conflict that stood between them, and the guilt that she feels for being angry at him in the last moments of his life is a driving factor for Ellie. The anger and hatred towards Abby for not only killing Ellie's father figure, but doing that right before they were starting to get closer again and right in front of her. That last part is still present in the show, but I wasn't able to feel with her beyond that one moment. Probably, and I'm sorry to do that as I liked that job in season 1, due to Bella Ramsey's acting. It was very weak, and that naive teenager attitude worked better for season 1 Ellie than season 2. I don't know how much was due to writing and how much due to Bella doing their usual thing. Now let's talk about Jackson. While it could have been an interesting side plot, it was resolved way too quickly for me. And that fight against the horde of infected was okay, I guess, but I personally don't need battles on a wall during winter in The Last of Us. You had your chance, HBO.
And you wasted it.
Generally, as I said, it could have been an interesting side plot, with the people of Jackson panicking and trying to figure out how to keep the cordyceps out. Maybe they saw Ben Shapiro's tweet about there not being enough zombies and thought he was right. If they did, they forgot the most basic rule. If Ben Shapiro disagrees with you, you're on the right track. Tommy did the Jon Snow screaming at the monster that ultimately drops dead right in front of him, and speaking of Tommy, he acts a lot more differently than his game counterpart. For me, he is way too rational and level-headed for someone who lost his brother through extremely brutal means. That 3-month gap between the murder of Joel and Ellie and Dina leaving Jackson also removed all sense of urgency. And this is also a very personal thing, that there is no safe haven trope in post-apocalyptic settings is so drawn out and annoying. I didn't like it in The Walking Dead and I don't like it here. Just leave Jackson alone. Let it be a place where people can live and enjoy their lives. Back to Ellie, she should be furious. Tommy as well. They longed for revenge in the game, with Tommy even leaving before Ellie does. Here it seems like the writers thought that the characters were way too revenge-driven in the game and just watered down everything. Which is fair enough, revenge is a fool's game after all, as a wise man once said, but it is the initial motivation for Ellie and Tommy, as well as Abby. Maybe being a father cools Tommy down a bit, as he doesn't have a child in the game. But I don't know. I would set the world on fire if someone killed my brothers. Generally, I do understand where the characters and their actions come from when looking at Tommy and Jesse, but somehow the writers didn't manage to make them likable. There are some strange side tracks. One of them happens in the very last episode that had nothing of value and just seem like they're there to stretch out the runtime. I don't get why they introduced parts of the WLF storyline while Abby's story is not yet shown in the slightest. The editing and CGI don't look good, the latter may be due to the streaming service being very poor quality. In Germany we don't have HBO Max, we have WOW, and it's the worst thing you could imagine streaming wise. Back to the show. Look at this scene and tell me that Crossfade isn't at least kind of weird. It just seems like they had a checklist of what's happening in Seattle in the game and put one setting after the other, but didn't really know how to make it authentic, I guess. It has a very low budget vibe to it, which is not great for a production of that scale. Now, I'm still looking forward to Season 3, as it is still the show to one of my all-time favorite games, but I'm skeptical. Let's hope that Caitlin Dever does a good job, as she's gotta do some heavy lifting. But that shouldn't be a problem for Abby. So, where does that leave us? As you can probably tell, I am disappointed. I had high hopes that they would do at least a decent job of adapting the source material, but they didn't. Well, for the most part. If you haven't played The Last of Us Part 2, I highly recommend you do. It really is a roller coaster of emotions. Those have been my thoughts on the matter, and I'd like to hear yours. Which parts you liked and which parts you didn't. Maybe you disagree with me completely, maybe you have things to add. Let's discuss in the comments. But remember, anytime someone uses the word woke, unironically to criticize something, a cute puppy dies. And we don't want cute puppies to die, do we?